All right.
Solid.
Thanks, everyone, again. So today I was going to talk a bit about creating VR narratives and how those narratives can be challenging to create and how those narratives can sometimes be very compelling once you've created them. So my background, just briefly, for the past 2 years, I've had the opportunity to get to work in VR, in virtual reality, and in particular in 360 film production. So there's sort of a subset of VR, of virtual reality, right? Virtual reality transport people to a new reality, okay? 360 video, 360 filmmaking is a linear experience. So they don't have agency. The user, the audience, they don't get to look around. Beyond looking around, they don't get to impact the outcome of the story. They can't knock the books off the shelf and that leads to a new outcome, right? All you can do is look around. And so, you know, that's one piece of the bigger VR pie. I think it's sort of, right now there's a lot of press and attention around that piece. There's, it's at Tribeca, it's at Sundance. But I think that really it's a stopgap. I think that 360 linear films are sort of where we are today, but soon enough, more and more our films will allow us to have more and more agency, right? Allow the users to make decisions inside the films and affect the outcomes. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work we've done and some of the work other people are doing that I think is really compelling and interesting. Let's see if I can get the button. All right, so just real quickly, we're going to talk about story development. We're going to talk about limitations and possibilities of 360 filmmaking. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some technical things, nuts and bolts. Of course, when radio turned into TV, there was this sort of tendency for people to line up and perform a radio play in front of a television camera, right? That seems only natural. Well, soon enough, we realized we could bring two cameras and you could have cutaways and close-ups. You can affect the pacing of a film through editing and through multiple cameras, right? So we took an old method, we had a new technology brought there, and that new technology allowed everyone to see what's going on. Instead of having a line of people, we realized we could make sets and we could have this sort of more natural, more organic conversations come out for our audiences. However, when VR came about, we had the same problem, right? This is a VR camera right here. It's recording a band playing, and it's also recording all the crew filming the band playing. So my guess is that they didn't intend to spend half of the real estate that they're creating, right? You're creating a 360-degree film, and they spent half the real estate showing themselves, right? That's a pretty boring back half of your movie. My guess is they didn't intend to show themselves. They just didn't realize, right? So they're recording a band. This is how you would normally record it. If you had a regular camera, you'd point it toward the band, and the audience would get to see that perspective. All of a sudden, this camera, we treat it differently, right? So some things we had an opportunity to do. I was at Discovery Channel for a few years, and when VR came about 2 years ago, when I found out about VR 2 years ago, it's been out for a while, we tried to think about how do we use VR that's not like that, that's not just radio on TV. And so we created these two pieces that I think are worth mentioning. One is called Through the Eyes of a Synesthete, and synesthesia is where the wires in your brain get crossed. And so sometimes you smell in colors, or you hear in feelings or tastes. So someone might say a name Eric, and it has a metallic or a buttery taste on your tongue. Some people have that, right? They're called synesthetes. And each synesthete is a snowflake. It's all unique. Everyone's different. And so we found someone with synesthesia. And it turns out what they do is they hear in colors. So when they play their violin, they're a violinist, this woman, and when she plays her violin, she sees colors instead of hears the sounds. Okay? And that's kind of a hard thing to explain to people, and a really hard thing for people to step inside the shoes of that experience, to foster empathy with someone with this sort of neurological phenomenon. And so that's what we tried to do. We tried to put you in her headspace. And so at first you see her facial expressions and you see how she performs and you kind of hear her story. And then you step inside her shoes and you see the world from her perspective as she plays the song, right? You see the lights light up all around you. And in this piece, so our remit here was science and education. And in this piece, because of course, science would be easy in VR. We could have just done Diet Coke in a circle and put Mentos in them all. And then you have science in 360. But that seemed very, first thought, seemed very TV on the radio. Radio on TV. Sorry. Surf school, right? So now we have an opportunity to teach people things. VR is a powerful tool for teaching. We used graphics to tell the audience where to look. We said, look over here. We're going to take this wave. Pro surfer, very handsome young man. Patagonia sponsored, big wave surfer, local guy. He takes the wave, and you get on that board with him. And instead of just teaching you how to pop up on a surfboard, right, the things you might be able to learn in your own living room, he actually teaches you about spatial awareness, where you are in the swell, which is a lesson in surfing that's really hard to get if you don't get on a surfboard. Turns out, really easy to get in VR. So he gets to take that wave over and over and over, and he takes you on that wave with him. And so he gets to say, okay, this time I want you to look at what I'm doing when I take the wave. Now we're going to back it up and we're going to look forward. Now we're going to look to the left, and it's always the same wave, right? And that's something that is unique to VR. We get that opportunity to look all around us, to build a spatial awareness, and to rewind and take note and highlight certain things that are going on. Here, he cut someone off, and he takes note. He points the audience in that direction, pauses the film, and keeps talking. So we tried to think outside the rectangle of making regular films. Now, Steven Spielberg recently expressed concern that power was going to get taken away from filmmakers because now 360 filmmaking is a thing. And this is a film, these screen grabs are a film from a piece that was made by Facebook that is about Grand Central Station in New York, and it's really beautiful. And they choreographed the experience. It's 10 minutes long, it's free, it's on Facebook. It's called Grand Central, I would highly recommend it. And they choreographed it. They shot it at like 4 a.m. And they brought all those people in, they're all extras. And they made it seem like you're really at Grand Central. And the whole thing is a choreography. It's pacing and timing. There's no cuts. There's no edits, right? They just choreographed these different conversations, these little vignettes that come close to the proximity of the camera, which is you, the audience, right? You are that camera. And then they fade away. And the whole time, what they did, what the Facebook team, the Oculus team did here was they crafted the whole scene. They didn't just craft a rectangle of the scene. They crafted 360 degrees of a scene. So I would just say, back to Stephen here, that we don't need to worry too much. We just need to be very aware of our attention to detail, right? No longer do we get to rely on the edge of the frame for drama and for suspense. That's how Steven Spielberg and many others have used the frame. Use that edge to not show what's on the other side. All of a sudden, the audience can see what's on all the sides, can see what's past the edge of the frame. And so maybe you put that scary person behind the door or behind the window or under the table so they pop out, right, in a new place. So I'll keep going. Now, one thing I mentioned here was that the camera is the audience, right? So imagine I'm the camera, and I'm 360 degrees. I got lenses pointing out in every direction, okay? And we want to get in a conversation. We want to record someone's awesome conversation, intimate moment, mother and daughter, beautiful moment. We want to record them talking. Now, if I was, maybe the first time I was doing this, I might want to put the camera between the mother and daughter, right? You could put that camera right between the mother and daughter, and then people would look right, and they'd hear the mom talk, and they'd look left, and they'd hear the daughter talk, look right. But turns out, that's kind of an uncomfortable place to stand as a real human. You don't really want to be in between people talking. That's not where a real person would stand. Similarly, if you had a circle of people talking, you wouldn't want to stand in the middle of them. You'd want to be one of the people, right? So we try to use the VR camera. It's been called an empathy machine, right? What does that mean? That means it allows the audience to step inside the shoes of another person. Okay, and you could have animal empathy. You could step inside the shoes of dogs, I guess, and things. But for our purposes, let's call it human perspective, right? And humans don't stand in the middle of a conference table. They don't get in the middle of a table and look all around. They take a seat at the table, right? And sometimes those actors around the table might acknowledge that camera, might look to the camera and sort of that Blue's Clues style, ask a question. What do you think? And they're looking right at you, right? And that's a powerful moment. That's something that in cinema history, there's a precedent that breaking the fourth wall is a really powerful tool to engage your audience, to make your audience feel like you're present. You have a place in the scene, right? So you can imagine in a film, they give you the sounds of the poker chips. They give you the sounds of the cards shuffling, right? Even before the lights come on, even before there's visuals, you have a place. You know you're sitting at a poker table, right? They teach you that over time with traditional media. And so now we have a new set of rules. We're learning a new set of rules as we make VR. So some of the cool things we've been able to do with VR as we look at the use cases, right? How do we apply VR? Is VR going to be, and who's read Ready Player One? Has anybody read Ready Player One? Okay, so the conceit of this book, Ready Player One, is that the future in the year is 2041, and the future allows people to, instead of going to school, you put on a headset and you stay in your living room and you go to school virtually for 8 hours a day. And then at the end, you take off the headset and you eat dinner and you go to bed, right? And what a sad world that would be, right? Everyone's pale and doesn't go outside and doesn't talk to others outside of a virtual mediated experience. So that is one future, that is one possible future of VR, of 360 video, of immersive media. That people stay inside more. People don't go out. People don't go to the Great Wall of China because you feel like you checked that box already. You did it in virtual reality, right? But we are on the other side of that spectrum. The work I do is about helping people get better at the real world, helping people be better people, right, outside of VR. So companies like Netflix and companies like HBO, and if you're here, I'm sorry, I love you all. I watch that. But they are chasing repeat viewers. They're chasing people that stay in the headset and watch for hour and hour and hour and binge watch in VR. That is that Ready Player One future. I bring up Ready Player One because they actually give it to every new employee at Oculus. And I think that's really interesting because they've hired hundreds of people that influence the outcomes of VR. So we should all be mindful that that is a possible future, that we could end up staying indoors all day. But here's what we've done with the work we've done with the UN. Some of the documentaries we've gotten to make put you in the shoes of a refugee child, put you in the shoes of a mother in Gaza, put you in the shoes of a survivor of someone that had Ebola and now has to deal with the stigma of being a survivor of Ebola, right? And those shoes are hard to walk in, they're hard to have access to, and they're hard to be in once you're there. And what we've been able to do is turn the empathy that fosters, being able to understand, I can see the world from the perspective of another, turning that into action. And at the UN, action a lot of times looks like fundraising, right? They need more funds to do all the plans they have, right? To deliver more rice, to get blankets, to have bed nets, to have tents and warm soup, right? So all those things that the boots on the ground of the UN have and are required to do, and that we believe they should be doing, they do with funds. And countries give all the funds to the UN. Well, all of a sudden, the UN realized they have a powerful fundraising tool in VR. So 2 years ago, we shot Clouds Over Sidra. Clouds Over Sidra, this is Ban Ki-moon. He's, former Secretary General of the UN. You could think of him as Obama of the world, up until a few days ago. He's watching the VR piece we made, and he shows that this is an event, a 24-hour donor conference. And it's an annual donor conference. Every year, people come together in Kuwait, actually, this is in Kuwait, and every year they come together and donate for the Syrian refugee crisis. It's a civil war that's been going on for 5 years, and for the past 4 years, they've had a refugee crisis. And so they've been raising funds around that crisis from private donors. So they have these private donor events, and they added VR this most recent year. And every year they give less and less. There's a real sense of donor fatigue across global issues, protracted issues that take a long time to solve, people give less and less for, right? You can't see an end in sight. You give a little less next year, you give a little less the year after that. Well, they expected to raise $2.3 billion in 24 hours. They raised $3.8 billion. So that's an extra $1.5 billion, one 8-minute film, okay? They also took that film, the UN took that film, and translated it into the six languages of the UN, and they gave it to the street teams of UNICEF, 2 kids in a clipboard, blue hats, all that. I didn't know this, but that's the biggest way that UNICEF makes money. UNICEF has those kids, those street teams are in Berlin, they're in Shanghai, they're in Sao Paulo, they're in Chicago, and they're always raising money all day long, all year long. That's the biggest way that UNICEF helps children around the world. Okay? And now they have added VR, they added the same film, same one piece of content. Think about the efficient impact in this one film. Okay? Step inside the shoes of a 12-year-old girl in a refugee camp. It's in Google Cardboard. The kid with the clipboard's got it. Here's the stats. Instead of 1 out of every 12 people donating, 1 out of every 6. So they've doubled their largest piece of revenue, just like that, with a piece of cardboard and a phone. And on average, those donations are 10% higher, right? So now they've really made a big impact in their revenue. So that's just one of the examples of sort of the impact that I think virtual reality has the potential to make in the world. Here's a bit of this is a 2-minute little video of a behind the scenes when we were in Gaza. And I just wanted you guys to spend a little time and think about, the production of content and the production of media in the face of real world problems, right? Because I could be making this content for Discovery Channel, selling Toyota RAV4s. We could be making it for, to be picked up at Sundance. We could be making these films for all sorts of reasons, but we choose to leverage our skills, leverage our talents, and leverage our interest in technology and scale and impact for real world issues that really affect the lives of others. And we make that choice as a conscious choice, right? As a company, as an individual, make that choice every day. So here's 2 minutes behind the scenes. Oh. Those children, those poor children. It's okay. No, we'll move on. We'll move on. Okay, so real quick, I've been told my time is up, so I'll just talk quickly instead of stopping. You're welcome. 2D monoscopic, 360 filming, right? One eye in every direction. 3D stereoscopic, 2 eyes in every direction, right? Left and right eye. Ambisonic sound, binaural audio. So having a surround audio, very crucial in a surround film, right? Going quickly, imagine the same photo, same opportunity, same shoot. What if these guys, instead of this picture being taken 2 years ago, which it was taken today? Maybe they would have thought, oh, now we've done this before a few times. We realize we're in the background of our own movie. Let's do it again. This time we're going to shoot these guys on the front. We're going to light them, right? And then all these people are going to come to this side, and we're going to put an audience over here, and we're going to light them and shoot that. And we can smash those 2 images together, right? Because we're already smashing images together. Simultaneous images, right, from the camera above. So these are creating simultaneous images. Or you take a picture, click, and now you have a plate. And you can insert in any scene you want into that spherical plate. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'll keep going real quick. Stitching, the most popular software is called Color with a K. Google bought it, GoPro bought it 2 years ago. It's still called Color. Premiere is where most people do their 360 editing in, which is just the standard Premiere. More and more it has updates to support 360. As we think about editing, rectangles that go alongside each other in sequential order, that is traditional editing, right? As we think about it in VR, because there's space, maybe it's character moves from white circle to black circle, then next shot picks up at white circle, goes to black circle, next shot picks up over here, goes that way, right? So people have to move around, the next shot comes up, they don't know where the character is, so you have to kind of think about that spatial awareness. Where is your audience looking from shot to shot, right? And then lastly, the questions that will plague us all. So 360 production is sort of death by 1,000 questions. Can we have jump cuts in VR? Right? A jump cut is where you get transported in a film, right? It cuts, and you're suddenly somewhere else. But when you're in VR, is that going to give people PTSD? Are you going to make people nauseous? Right? So it turns out that people thought you can't do jump cuts in VR. That'll be the plan. The rule is no jump cuts. Turns out Google made this film. It's called Pearl. The whole film is jump cuts. And the way they did it was you're inside this front seat, passenger seat of a car, and that car is a frame. That car is a frame of reference. So you always know, as the jumps happen, you always know which way is forward. You always know where you are in the world. You always have a point of reference, right? In gaming, they talk about being able to see the bridge of your nose prevents nausea. So if you can see the bridge of your nose, you know which way your body is facing in the game, right? All of a sudden, less nausea. So similarly, lots of questions as VR sort of overtakes filmmaking in a way for today. And we're very excited to explore all the answers to those questions. And that's it.